All it takes is one click. One click on Instagram to see hate. Hate for the 90s, hate for the 80s, hate for the 70s, hate for the 50s, and most of all, hate for the 60s. What used to be claimed as the most dominant era is now frowned upon. Wilt played against 5'7" white guys. Bill Russell only won as much as he did because there were only 9 teams. The defense was trash. The league was trash. It was dominated by one team. The hate has to stop. It has to stop now. Not only are the 60s underrated, the 60s are debatably the best era in NBA history. Let me tell you why. Well, to start off, let's begin with the Wilt played against 5'7" white guys quote. This doesn't apply to just Wilt Chamberlain either, it applies to basically every single dominant center in the 60s. The fact that this rumor is still going around is outrageous, and the fact of the matter is, it's just people conforming to others' opinions and not forming their own. Anyways, let's take a look at the 1961-1962 season to bust this myth. If you don't already know, this is the season where Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 points per game. Anyways, so we all know Wilt Chamberlain was a center, so therefore we will be looking at all of the centers in the league, starting off with the Boston Celtics at the number 1 seed. So as you can see, the only center on the roster is Bill Russell, who obviously played most of the game, and is 6'10". The second seed this season was the Philadelphia Warriors, who had none other than Wilt Chamberlain, who was just taller than 7'1". The third seed was the Syracuse Nationals, who had 2 centers. One was Swede Halbrook, who was 7'3", and the second was Red Kerr, who was listed at 6'9". So already you can tell that this accusation is false, and the average height of the centers in the 1961-1962 season was just over 6'11". The average height of a center in today's league is nearly the same, if not less. Now for the white part. Around 75% of the league today is African American, and inside the 60s it was nearly equivalent, so there goes that rumor. And if you're wondering, the game Wilt dropped 100 points in was against a 6'10" center named Darrell Imhoff, who is far from a bad player and even made the All-Star game once. Now, onto the rules. Many fans claim that Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain only dominated because of the lack of rules, but that is simply not true. First off, the 24-second shot clock was already in place in 1954, the 3-second rule was introduced in 1936, illegal defense had been in place since 1947, and goaltending was introduced in the early 1950s, so there was nothing in place to help these guys dominate any more than the players today in terms of rules. So now that we've gone through this physical rumors, let's go on to the skills part. Many fans claim that the ball handling was bad in the 60s, and although this is partially true, it's also false as players in this era, and all the way out to the 90s, didn't handle the ball to the side of them like we see today, and instead dribbled in front of them, therefore restricting their ability to use crossovers efficiently. This is because back then, this was seen as a carry and also limited their offhand dribbling, which was a big factor in why you see players from the 60s dominating the ball with their dominant hand. This also resulted in more turnovers and less assists. In today's NBA, the refs always seem to favor the home team, right? Right. Well, inside the 1960s, the refs would basically do anything in their power to stop the best players in the league from dominating. Many of the referees have admitted that they let guys get away with hacking Wilt on the offensive end because that's just how dominant he really was. They did this to make up for the fact that Wilt was so big and physically talented. In later years, they did this because they felt sorry for Wilt because he couldn't shoot a free throw to save his life and would end up scoring less anyways. One ref told him, "Wilt, I know you get hacked every time, but the game would be pretty boring watching you go for 1 for 2 from the line every time down the court." The same goes for guys like Russell and Thurmond, who just get pounded in the paint, but get shrugged off because of their talent. Next up is the talent gap. There was no talent gap. Even if people think players dominated because of the lack of competition, that is more than false. It's the exact same as it is today. There are Hall of Famers, Superstars, All-Stars, Starters, Role Players, and Bench Players. So, let's go through some of the best players from the 1960s, shall we? At the point guard position, we have Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Walt Frazier, Hall Greer, Bob Cousy, Lenny Wilkins, Casey Jones, and Guy Rogers. That's 9 superstar and Hall of Fame point guards in the same league. On to the shooting guard position. In the 1960s, there were a ton of shooting guards who played both guard positions, but in any case, we have Sam Jones, Hall Greer, Earl Monroe, John Havlicek, Lou Hudson, Richie Gruen, and Pete Maravich. The main small forwards were Elgin Baylor, Rick Barry, John Havlicek, Connie Hawkins, Billy Cunningham, and Tom Heinsohn. The key power forwards were Bob Pettit, Nate Thurmond, Elvin Hayes, Jerry Lucas, Dave DeBusschere, Tom Heinsohn, and Dolph Schayes. And the main centers were Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Nate Thurmond, Willis Reed, Bob Pettit, Elvin Hayes, and Walt Bellamy. The 60s had a total of 9 Hall of Fame centers. So as you can see, that's a lot of household names. We all know those guys played, but we never considered the fact that they all played together in the same league at the same time. Not to mention the fact that there were only 9 to 11 teams at this time. To put this into retrospective, pretend that we cut the current league down to only 9 teams. That would leave only the best of the best players in the league. Some great role players wouldn't even get minutes with 9 teams. So as you can see, with the league smaller at the time, it was much harder to even get into the league, never mind make it big. In one instance, Bill Russell was having a debate with Michael Jordan in 1993. Jordan, being the trash talker he is, said, "You had it easy, Bill. You only had 11 teams in your league." Bill Russell then replied, "That means only the best of the best were in my league. If you had 11 teams in your league right now, you wouldn't have won the finals this year." Jordan quickly replied, "How?" In which Bill responded, "In Game 5 of the 1992 finals, Steve Kerr hit the game winner to take the lead in the finals, right?" Jordan said, "Yeah, and what does that have to do with anything?" Bill then said, "If there were 11 teams in the NBA, only the best players would have been in the league. Kerr is a role player. He wouldn't be talented enough to play in a league with a limited amount of teams." So as you can see, more people than just me are aware of this, and is a ginormous factor in why the 60s and 70s retrospectively are underrated. There always must be a cross argument though. There is no doubt that if you throw Jerry West into the league today without any training, he would suffer. He would probably be one of the worst players in the league, if not the worst, and would struggle to match the pace of the game today. This goes for most of the guards from that era, but this is a very unfair argument because players, centers included, didn't have the training and nutrition we have today. If a player like Nate Thurmond, for example, grew up in this day and age, he would play with today's playstyle and undoubtedly put up just as great numbers as he did in his prime. Same goes for all the physically gifted players in the league at that time. Some would even put up greater numbers in areas because of the less physical defense played today. Like I mentioned earlier, players hounded Wilt for the ball whenever it would get played inside him, and despite what many think, Wilt didn't play a one-on-one too often, never mind Bill Russell. The final thing that must be brought up is the rumor that Bill Russell's Boston Celtics dominated the 60s. Although that is partially true as they won 9 out of 10 finals in the 60s, they didn't necessarily breeze their way through the playoffs. They went to 7 games 5 times, and in 1957 they won the finals in a double overtime win by 2 points. Inside 1962 they won the finals again in 7 games, this time heading to a single overtime and winning by 3. In the 1966 NBA Finals, they beat the Lakers by only 2 points again. And finally in the 1969 NBA Finals, they beat the Lakers yet again in a 7-game series by 2. Nearly every single finals game they played was close, and most years weren't even the first seed. They were as far down as the rankings as the 7th seed one year, but still won the NBA championship. So although they were the best team in the 60s, without a doubt, they weren't by far the best in the league, and had to fight every step of the way to win those rings. So in conclusion, the 60s need much more respect because people forget that there were only 9 teams back in that era, which means there were numerous occasions with the starting lineup of Hall of Famers. These guys were talented too, many more talented than any player in the league today. They just never had the insight and kinesthetics that we do now, and if you're still not convinced that the 60s are underrated, put it this way. Out of all the NBA 2Ks, which one do you think is the best? Most would say something like 2K14 or 2K11. Undoubtedly the best 2K game currently is NBA 2K19, but we just remember all those games for being good for their time. We don't just take the newest game and say it's the best because it has the best graphics, gameplay, and modes. We look at the game that was best for its time and got us into the game. So the same goes for eras. Even if James Harden would destroy Hall Greer in a one-on-one, we just can't put it that way because of these circumstances. It's just not fair. Fans look at these players' stats and just assume, since they're so good, that they played against easy competition. We never hear of excuses for Yao Ming's height, but yet Wilt Chamberlain, who's a whole 6 inches shorter, doesn't get a pass? If Wilt never averaged 50 points in 1961 and instead had 40, along with his rebounds and assists dropping, I'm sure he would be getting much less hate. The same goes for the other players who put up big numbers, so stop the hate and respect the trendsetters, as most of the moves we know today came from them. Yo guys, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I do videos like this and 2K videos, and also leave a like because these videos take so long to make and it would really mean a lot. So yeah, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And also, stop being ignorant about the 60s, please.